It's time to explore the conjugations of saber. Let's go to the Saber post office and see what's inside. Today, Joel goes to Saber because he's expecting a check. He lied to his rich uncle that he was having financial difficulties. His uncle said that he'd send Joel something. When Joel picks up the envelope inside Saber, the pandas crowd around him to find out what's inside. They say, "How much did he send?" This annoys Joel. Why is it their business? Anyway, he hasn't even opened the envelope yet. Sometimes he prefers to wait, savoring the excitement of not knowing. As long as he doesn't read the check, he can imagine that he's been sent $1 million. He hovers there silently while the pandas continue to push him. "How much is it? Say, say!" Saber himself, the postmaster, is curious as well. He stops crying for just a moment, and he joins in the chanting. "Say, say." Joel finally bursts out, "I don't know." But to say this, he says, "No sé." The word sé means I know. When Joel says no sé, he means I don't know. Joel often equates the words no and sé in this particular way. He's one to speak his mind, and so for him, knowing something is often the same thing as saying it. For example, to say, "I already know," Joel says, "Ya sé." Admittedly, se is a very strange conjugation. It doesn't fit most of the first-person patterns that we're used to, such as soy, estoy, voy, tengo, hago, and quiero. Instead of ending with o or oi, it ends with e, the letter E. Haber and Saber, the two bear shops, which are right next to each other, are the only places where Joel's conjugation ends this way. So e for I have, and sé for I know. But other than that, Saber is actually a pretty normal shop. Joel accidentally drops his envelope into a puddle of tears on the floor, and the bear and the pandas all start crying, especially the bear, who sobs very loudly. It's contagious. The lizard begins to sob too. The conjugations here are sabe, sabes, saben, and sabemos. So those are pretty normal conjugations. The past tense is also very standard, so we don't really need a mnemonic for it. Just remember hacía from hacer, había from haber, and podía from poder. These are the past tense forms of the verbs closest to saber, so they have a stress on ia. The normal past tense of saber is sabía, or of course sabían, sabías, or sabíamos. For example, to say, "I knew it," Joel would say, "Lo sabía." We're moving pretty quickly here, but in the future we won't really use mnemonics for every single form of new verbs because they'll fit the normal patterns that we're already familiar with for the most part. We've now learned all the common conjugations of saber, but let's take a peek in the backyard. Behind Saber, a bunch of apes dressed in mailman suits are playing in a pile of mail. One of them grabs Joel's soaked envelope that he's holding and tears it in pieces. The stressed syllable ape for these apes in the backyard represents that sepa is Saber's strange subjunctive. For example, "I want you to know" would be quiero que sepas. Also take careful note of that P in that subjunctive form because the P also appears in Saber's rare preterite, which is supe or supo, kind of like pude and pudo from poder. Here's some examples of saber. "I don't know why I called him" would be no sé por qué lo I called. As a variation on this, "they don't know why I called them" would be no saben por qué los I called. And how do you know that? This would be ¿Y cómo sabes eso tú?
¿Y cómo sabes eso tú?
She always knows it all. That would be siempre lo sabe todo.
Siempre lo sabe todo.
The preterite form of saber that I mentioned, supe, supo, etc., is less common than the general imperfect past tense, which is sabía and so on. But when someone suddenly knows something as an event, the preterite can be used. It's sort of like realizing something. For example, and how did the boy know that? Or, and how did the boy come to know that? This is phrased as, and how knew that the boy? Or, y cómo supo eso, the boy. If you can list all of the conjugations of saber that we just learned, categorized by tense, then you're ready for some more verb conjugations. While we're in the neighborhood, let's visit haber again to learn the last forms of this verb that we need for fluency. First of all, remember that I mentioned earlier we saw that this mostly blind bear is currently doing karate in his backyard. The subjunctive of haber is allá. So this is something that a bear might scream while doing blind kicks and punches. Allá. Here's an example of how that might be used. We use haber for existence in sentences like, there isn't place or there isn't room. That would be, no hay lugar. But if we replace the no with perhaps, like tal vez, we would say, tal vez haya lugar. Let's use an even more complicated example. First of all, the idiom una vez que is used to mean once this happens, or once this thing happens. It's almost always followed by a subjunctive phrase, because it indicates the future. So here's a simple example. Once she be here, we're going to do it. That would be, una vez que ella esté aquí, lo vamos a hacer. How about, once they do it, we're going to leave. That would be, una vez que lo hagan, using that subjunctive there, nos vamos a ir. To make a more complicated sentence structure, we can change that subjunctive verb to haya, and this time we'll be using haber, or haya specifically, to put something else in the past. For example, once the man has gone. Normally, the man has gone would be el hombre ha ido. But since it's subjunctive, it would be una vez que el hombre haya ido. That is pretty advanced. We're talking about the hypothetical past of the future. Now on to another word. There are also some mud bricks that have formed in the ground below the bear's karate practice. You might remember something similar in the muddy backyard of poder. In Yol, when mud forms and then sits in one place for a year, it turns into bricks. The word hubiera, with a stress on yer, is the past tense subjunctive of haber. As you can see, the word sounds a lot like pudiera and other past tense subjunctives such as fuera and hiciera. Hubiera is used a lot like we've learned to use fuera in previous episodes. So it's used to indicate hypothetical situations. Consider this example of fuera. If he were nice, he wouldn't go there. Si él fuera bueno, no iría ahí. Now we can put this in the past using hubiera. Instead of si él fuera bueno, we can say si él hubiera sido bueno. Literally, if he were to have been nice. This is the most common use of hubiera. And this is actually pretty handy. You can use hubiera along with any participle to put any verb in the hypothetical mood. For example, if she had been here would be si hubiera estado aquí. If she had had that would be si hubiera tenido eso. If she had gone there would be si hubiera ido ahí. If she had done this would be si hubiera hecho esto. Past tense subjunctives can be kind of complicated, but instead of finding the past tense subjunctives of each of those verbs, estar, tener, ir, and hacer, all we did was use hubiera and then the participle of each of those. Now, to the side of haber, as always, is an air conditioning unit. The conditional version of haber is habría, with the stressed syllable ría, as always. Here's a good sentence example that uses both the past tense subjunctive, hubieras, and the conditional, habría. If you had wanted to do something bad, you already would have done it. So this is complicated, but it's not too difficult. We're just using haber conjugated in two different ways. If you had wanted to do something bad, you already would have done it. So it's if you had wanted to do something bad. That's si hubieras querido hacer algo malo. You already would have done it. Ya lo habrías hecho. Before we leave haber, let's look inside really quickly. In addition to the animal skins hanging around the store, there's a stuffed owl in the merchandise area. When it's dark, this owl spontaneously hoots loudly. Most owls in Yol say, hoo. But this owl doesn't pronounce the H, so it just says, ooh. The word ubo, with the stress on u, ubo, is the most common preterite form of haber. It indicates that something exists, just like I and había, but in this case the existence is an event. A common example is, there was a problem. The fact that there's a problem, in this case, is sudden, like an event. So here's a sentence example. But he couldn't because there was a problem. Pero no pudo porque hubo un problema.
Pero no pudo porque hubo un problema.
I recommend that you review and practice all of your new forms of saber and haber before moving on to other verbs.